In the quiet village of Ndele, hidden deep in the heart of Africa, 16-year-old Zarah marries a 72-year-old foreign stranger named Walter Graves to save her dying brother, trading her future for his life. But instead of cruelty, she finds strange kindness. Walter gives her everything: her own room, soft clothes, hot meals, even tea served daily at exactly 4 p.m. Yet he whispers to empty corners, calls her by another name when he thinks she's not listening. 10 days later, while exploring his ancient home, Zarah lifts a loose floorboard, and underneath, she finds a photo of a girl who looks exactly like her, with one haunting name written on the back: Amira Graves. Zarah was only 13, but life had already aged her soul. She lived in the rusted skeleton of an old train carriage in the forgotten corners of Ndele, with her mother and little brother Ayan. The walls moaned when the wind passed through, and the nights were so cold that sometimes she thought the silence itself could kill. Every morning, her mother would braid her hair with shaking fingers while whispering promises they both knew were lies. It'll get better. But it never did. There were days when they didn't eat, nights when Ayan whimpered in pain, his tiny body curled against Zarah's chest like he was trying to hide from the world. His seizures had started months ago, sharp, sudden, and terrifying. They thought it would pass, but it only grew worse. The village clinic wouldn't even let them in without money. Real money, not promises, not tears, not prayers. Zarah begged. She tried selling wild fruits in the market. She even offered to carry water for strangers, but no one trusted a skinny girl with tired eyes and cracked heels. Her mother pawned their last blanket, her own shoes, and even the beads from her wedding necklace. Nothing was enough. Ayan's body grew weaker, his voice quieter, his eyes dimmer. One night, after another cruel seizure, they ran to the hospital, cradling him in a torn shawl. But the nurse at the desk didn't even look up. "No payment, no bed," she said coldly. Zarah screamed, her mother pleaded, but they were thrown out like stray dogs. That was the night everything changed. The wedding felt more like a funeral than a celebration. There was no music, no singing, no clapping hands, just silence, heavy and uncomfortable, like the air itself was mourning. Zarah stood still under a tall, leafless tree in the village square, wearing an old white dress donated by a charity woman who didn't ask questions. The dress was too big for her thin frame. The sleeves slid down her arms, and the hem dragged in the dust. Her feet were bare. Her hair was tied back with a faded ribbon. She looked like a child trying to pretend she was grown, and maybe she was. Walter Graves stood a few feet away, dressed in a sharp black suit that looked brand new, like he had just stepped out of another world. His skin was pale, his hands perfectly still, and his eyes didn't show any happiness or excitement. There was no warmth in him, only stillness. When he looked at Zarah, it wasn't with love or desire. It was like he was studying her, trying to remember something he had once forgotten. No one dared ask questions. The few elders who agreed to witness the ceremony didn't smile or speak. They just watched with tired eyes and heavy hearts, as if they too felt this wasn't right but had no power to stop it. There were no vows, no soft words whispered under breath, no hands held tight with trembling fingers, just paper, ink, and silence. A government official read the legal words in a flat voice while Zarah stood like a statue. When it was time to sign, her hand shook as she gripped the pen. She couldn't even read the paper properly. It was in a language she barely understood, but she signed anyway. For Ayan, for her mother, for the life they might still have. Walter signed next, his signature sharp and neat. He didn't look at her, didn't smile, didn't even blink. There was no kiss, no applause. The elder simply said, "It is done," and that was it. Zarah was now a wife, at 13. Her mother didn't come to the ceremony. She couldn't. The shame was too much, the pain too deep. Instead, she stayed behind, holding Ayan close, praying he would wake up better. Zarah didn't cry. She had no more tears left. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the village, Zarah followed Walter to his car. The engine purred softly. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and just like that, she left the world she knew. To the people watching, it was a strange deal. A rich foreigner marrying a poor village girl half a century younger. Some whispered that it was disgusting. Others said it was just survival, but no one truly knew what it felt like. For Zarah, it wasn't love. It wasn't even hate. It was a sacrifice. A silent decision made in a storm of fear. She didn't feel like a bride. She felt like a soldier, walking into a war she didn't understand. Her hands were cold, her chest was tight, and as the car drove away, she stared out the window, wondering what kind of life waited for her at the end of the road. Zarah had imagined the worst. She had prepared herself for pain, for coldness, for cruelty. But when she stepped into Walter Graves's mansion on the edge of the quiet hills outside the village of Karuma, everything she had prepared for shattered. The gates were tall, the house was enormous, and silence wrapped the air like a blanket. Too clean, too perfect, too still. Inside, marble floors reflected the soft lights above. The walls were filled with paintings, strange and beautiful, most of them portraits of a girl with dark eyes. Zarah looked at those paintings and felt something strange deep in her stomach. The girl looked too much like her. Her room was at the far end of a long hallway, bigger than the one she had shared with her mother and brother in the train yard. The bed was soft, the sheets white and new, and the window opened to a garden full of roses. On the desk were art supplies, watercolors, pencils, sketchbooks. She had told no one she liked to draw, and yet there they were. She didn't touch them at first. It felt like a trap, but nothing happened. The days passed quietly. No one came to hurt her. No one yelled. No one asked her to clean or serve. There were housemaids, but they didn't speak to her much, just nodded and disappeared. The food was warm, served on clean plates. Every day was calm, too calm. Walter, the man she had married, barely came near her. In the mornings, he sat in the sunroom, reading thick books in languages she didn't understand. In the evenings, he disappeared into a locked room on the 3rd floor, and every day, exactly at 4 p.m., he would knock gently on her door, open it slightly, and hand her a cup of tea with honey. He would say only one thing, "You remind me of someone." Then he would leave. Same time, same words, over and over again. At first, she thought he was just being polite. Then she wondered if he was crazy, but the way he said it, the way his voice grew soft and his eyes distant, made her curious. Who was this someone? Why did she matter so much? And why was he looking at Zarah like she was a ghost from his past? The house was quiet, but not peaceful. At night, Zarah would wake to soft footsteps above her room, sometimes whispers behind the walls. Once, she followed the sound and found herself standing in front of the locked door on the 3rd floor. It had a single nameplate, nailed into the wood. Amira. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't ask. Something in her chest told her not to. Still, she was safe. For the first time in her life, she slept on clean sheets and woke without hunger. But comfort didn't erase confusion. Why was she here? Why hadn't he touched her? Why did he spend hours staring at the same painting of that girl who looked like her, whose name no one spoke? She drew pictures to calm her mind, pictures of the train yard, of Ayan's face, of her mother's tired eyes. But no matter what she sketched, the same face kept appearing on the page. A girl with long braids and a quiet smile, standing beside a man in black. The same face from the hallway painting. The same face that stared back at her from a photo frame she found tucked behind the bookshelf. Zarah was beginning to realize something wasn't right. Comfort didn't always mean safety, and kindness, when too perfect, often hid a shadow. Every night, after the house went quiet, Zarah would lie awake in her bed listening. The mansion, as beautiful as it was, had a strange silence that felt heavier after sunset. But there was one room that never truly slept, Walter's study. Its door always stayed locked, no matter the hour. From behind it came whispers, like someone talking softly to the shadows. Some nights, Zarah heard what sounded like a lullaby, sung so gently it made her chest ache. Other times, it was angry shouting, words she couldn't understand, mixed with sobs that didn't match the cold man she saw during the day. But the most disturbing night was when she clearly heard Walter crying, a deep, broken sound that shook her more than anything else. It didn't sound like a man, it sounded like a heart giving up. One night, curiosity finally won over fear. She tiptoed down the long hallway, careful not to make the wooden floors creak. She reached the locked door and leaned close. It was quiet inside, just silence. But then, soft humming and a whisper. "Amira, you're still here, aren't you?" The voice sent chills down her spine. She bent down, pressing her eye to the tiny keyhole. At first, all she saw was darkness. But as her eyes adjusted, she saw something that made her heart pound. The walls inside were covered, completely covered, with photographs. Some old, yellowed by time. others newer, but every single one showed the same face. A girl with big eyes, dark curly hair, and a quiet smile. A girl who looked exactly like Zarah. She staggered back from the door, her breath catching in her throat. Who was that girl? And why did Walter keep her photos like a shrine? Why did he call her Amira? That name echoed in her mind like a ghost. Was it his daughter? A lost wife? A twin she never knew she had? Her mind raced, each question heavier than the last. She tiptoed back to her room, too scared to ask, too shocked to sleep. But from that night on, the mansion no longer felt like a golden cage. It felt like a puzzle, and somewhere behind that locked door was the first missing piece. It happened on the 10th night, just as the moon hung low and heavy over the quiet village. Zarah couldn't sleep. The air felt strange, like it was holding its breath. That night, instead of the usual silence, she heard something new. Music, faint, distant, and haunting, like it was coming from the walls themselves. A slow, old melody that didn't belong to anything she recognized. She followed the sound barefoot, her fingers brushing the cold walls as it led her to a far corner of her room. That's when she noticed it. The floorboards beneath her feet were humming. One plank felt loose, out of place. Her heartbeat quickened as she crouched down and gently pried it up. Underneath the floor, hidden in a shallow space thick with dust, was a small, rusted chest. It looked forgotten by time, its corners eaten away by age. She hesitated. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, were things that didn't make sense. A soft, faded doll with missing eyes, a stack of worn letters tied with ribbon, photographs, some torn, some curled, but all showing the same girl, the same face she'd seen through the keyhole, the same eyes that stared back at her from the mirror. Then, at the bottom of the chest, she found a paper that made her blood run cold. A missing person report. The name at the top, Amira Graves, age 13, last seen 20 years ago, daughter of Walter Graves. Zarah's breath caught in her throat. 20 years ago. That girl had vanished at the same age Zarah was now. Same hair, same eyes, same quiet smile. It felt impossible, but the proof was in her hand. Her fingers shook as she read through the letters. They were written in careful handwriting, signed Daddy. Every word was soaked in love, guilt, and desperation. Come home, Amira. One letter read, I forgive you. I always will. Another one said, she looks just like you. I thought I could forget, but I see your face every day. Zarah's head spun. Was Walter trying to replace his daughter with her? Was that why he'd married her? Had he lost his mind? Or had grief swallowed him whole? Clutching the doll to her chest, Zarah stared into the dark hole beneath the floor. Questions flooded her mind, each heavier than the last. What happened to Amira? Why did she vanish? And what did Walter really want from her? She closed the chest slowly, but her world had already opened. Everything had changed. The mansion's warmth now felt like a trap. Every glance from Walter, every kind gesture, she now wondered what memories he was truly seeing. Zarah wasn't just a girl in a strange marriage anymore. She had become the center of someone else's unsolved story, and she wasn't sure she was ready to know how it ended. Zarah walked into the dimly lit dining room with the photo in her trembling hands. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual. Walter was sitting at the table, quietly stirring his tea like he always did at 4 p.m. But this time, there was no calm in her heart, no mystery, only fire. She placed the photo on the table in front of him, her eyes not leaving his face for even a second. Who is this? She asked, her voice low but shaking with emotion. Walter froze. His spoon clattered inside the teacup. Slowly, he lifted the photo with trembling hands. His fingers brushed the edges like he was touching a ghost. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared. Then came a whisper. That's my daughter, he said, voice broken, fragile. Amira. His eyes clouded with a pain so deep, it made Zarah step back. We adopted her when she was just a baby, he continued, as if the words were tearing out of his chest. From a village not far from here. She was my light, but she was always searching for where she came from. He blinked hard, and tears started falling down his cheeks. She ran away when she was 13, disappeared without a trace. I searched every corner of this country, every road, every home, but she was gone. Zarah's voice cracked. Why me? Her heart pounded. Why did you marry me? Walter looked up, and for the first time, he looked small, not powerful, not mysterious, just an old man drowning in regret. Because, he whispered, you have her eyes, her voice, the way you hold your spoon, the way you look at the rain. You remind me of her so much. It hurts. He covered his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. At first, I thought it was fate, a second chance. But then I realized I wasn't trying to replace her. I was trying to find peace. Zarah stood frozen. Every moment of kindness he'd shown her now twisted into something else, something heartbreaking. He wasn't in love. He wasn't cruel. He was just broken. I didn't marry you for company, he whispered, staring into his tea. I married you for forgiveness. His voice cracked at the last word. I thought, maybe if I saved someone, helped someone, maybe the universe would forgive me for losing her. Tears streamed down Zarah's face now too. She didn't know what to say. Her world had been hunger, fear, survival, and now she was standing inside the shattered heart of a man who had been grieving for 20 years. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But most of all, she wanted to understand. Walter looked up at her again. You're not her, he said softly. I know that. But when I saw you in the hospital, desperate to save your brother, something inside me woke up. I couldn't save Amira, but maybe I could save you. Zarah sank into the chair across from him. Her hands still clutched the photo. For a long time they just sat there, two souls joined by pain and memory, no longer strangers, no longer pretending, just a broken man and a girl who looked like a memory. And in that moment, under the quiet roof of a haunted mansion, something shifted between them. Not love, not forgiveness, but truth. And sometimes the truth is the only thing that can set you free. Walter sat by the window, the light from the late afternoon sun washing over his tired face. Zarah stood nearby, holding the photo of the girl she now knew as Amira, Walter's missing daughter. The silence between them was thick, but the air was full of things unspoken. Finally, with a heavy breath, Walter began to speak. His voice was low, steady, but each word felt like it was pulled from the deepest part of his pain. After she ran away, he said, I thought she would come back in a few days. She was just a child, angry, confused, but days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. His eyes stared into the distance, not seeing the room around him, but something far away, somewhere lost in the past. I put up posters, called every agency, hired private investigators. I even slept in train stations hoping she'd walk by, but no one saw her, no one helped. Zarah listened quietly, her heart racing. She could feel the ache in his voice, the emptiness he carried. 3 years later, Walter continued, I got a call from someone in a far-off city. They said they had seen a girl who looked like Amira. I went. It was her. His voice cracked. But she wasn't the same. Zarah's breath caught in her throat. She had been taken, trafficked, Walter said, his hands trembling. They stole her childhood, her safety, her smile. By the time I found her, she wouldn't even look at me. She just stared, like she didn't know who I was. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't want to remember. He looked down at his lap, ashamed. I tried to bring her back, but she ran again, and after that, there was nothing. No more leads, no more hope. The room felt cold now. Zarah couldn't imagine that kind of pain, the kind that never ends, that never lets you sleep. Every year, Walter whispered, I came back to this region, hoping, searching, praying. I even went to the village she was born in, talked to the old women who remembered her adoption, but no one knew anything. No answers, just silence. He paused and looked at Zarah. And then one day, I saw you. Zarah blinked, remembering the moment he had first approached her in the market. She had been barefoot, clothes torn, hair tangled by the wind, holding a bowl out to strangers as her brother coughed beside her. You were kneeling in the dust, Walter said. Your brother was shaking. You looked up at me, and for a second, I thought I had gone mad. You looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same strength. I stood there frozen. I didn't even hear what you said. All I could think was, maybe this is my second chance, not to bring Amira back, but to save someone else, to do something right before I die. His voice fell into a whisper. I didn't want a wife. I didn't want a companion. I wanted to give you a life that wasn't stolen from you, like hers was. Zarah's eyes welled up with tears. She looked at him, not with fear or confusion, but with something new, understanding. She could see it now. All the silence, all the tea at 4 p.m., The books, the art supplies, the room that was hers but never touched. It wasn't about love. It was about redemption. It was about trying to fill a hole that could never really close. For the first time, she saw the man not as a mystery, not as a buyer of fate, but as a father who had lost everything. A man haunted by memories, chasing ghosts. And maybe, just maybe, she was his one chance to turn the pain into peace. Zarah stood in the hallway, her hands clenched at her sides. Her mind spun with everything she had learned, the photos, the music, the missing girl, Amira, Walter's daughter, and now she knew why he looked at her the way he did, why he married her without a smile, why his hands trembled when he saw her eyes. It wasn't love, it was grief, guilt, hope, all mixed into something heavy and hard to understand. But Zarah understood one thing. She couldn't live like a ghost in someone else's memory. She had her own story. That night, she walked into the study, the door no longer locked, no longer a mystery. Walter sat in his chair, silent, almost afraid to meet her eyes. She didn't sit, she didn't cry, she just spoke. "I'll stay," she said, "but not like this. Not as your wife. I'm not her. I'll never be her." Walter's lips parted, but no words came out. "I want something real," she continued. "I want to learn. You teach me, and you open a clinic. For kids like Ayan, you give them something better, not out of guilt, but because it's right." Walter finally looked up. For a long time he didn't speak. Then he nodded, slowly, as if each movement was made of pain, but it was also a beginning. The next morning, Zarah sat at the long dining table with a notebook and a pencil. Walter placed a textbook in front of her and began to teach her letters, then words, then how those words built stories. She listened. She asked questions. She learned fast, not because she wanted to please him, but because knowledge made her stronger. In the afternoons, they went to the city. Walter made calls, signed papers, and soon, a small building was painted with bright colors and a sign that read, "Free care for children." It was simple, but to Zarah, it was a castle, a dream she never knew she had. Ayan was the first to step through its doors, his eyes wide, his steps unsure. He had never seen a place so clean, so safe. He clung to Zarah's hand the whole time, and when the doctor gave him a toy at the end, he smiled, a real smile. Zarah hadn't seen that in a long time. At home, things were quiet, not cold, just calm. Walter and Zarah ate dinner together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with soft conversation. He told her about Amira, how she used to draw on the walls and sing in the mornings. Zarah listened, not because she wanted to be Amira, but because it helped Walter heal. She told him about Ayan, about the night she almost gave up, about how she sang lullabies just to keep his fears away. There was no love between them, but there was something else. Respect, pain, understanding. They weren't husband and wife. They were two broken souls building something new. Zarah didn't wear the wedding ring anymore. She wore a bracelet Ayan made for her out of thread and button. It reminded her of who she was and who she was becoming. Word spread. People in the city whispered about the quiet girl with strong eyes and the old man who followed her lead. They didn't know the full story. No one did. But they saw the change. Zarah stood taller now. She didn't wait for orders. She gave them. She read books late into the night, planned clinics, and talked to children like she once had been one of them, because she had. And in a strange way, she had found a family, not through love, but through healing. Walter, Ayan, the children, they were all part of something new. She had entered that house as a sacrifice. Now, she stayed by choice. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, while the sun poured through the windows and dust danced in the golden light. Zarah was in the library, flipping through an old book Walter had given her, one with faded pages and a cracked spine. She wasn't looking for anything, just passing time between her lessons and her visits to the clinic. But as she turned a page, something slipped out, a small, yellowed envelope, tucked deep between two chapters. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. There was no name on it, just the date, 20 years ago. Her heart raced. She opened it carefully, as if the paper might tear just from her breath. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was soft, rushed, but full of emotion. It began simply, "To anyone who finds this," and as she read, Zarah's eyes filled with tears. It was Amira's voice, trapped in ink, speaking across time. She wrote about the nights she cried herself to sleep, how she felt invisible, how she wished someone had seen her pain, had asked her if she was okay. She wrote about running away, not because she hated Walter, but because the silence at home was louder than shouting. She felt lost, unwanted. She had no idea that danger was waiting just outside. The last line was what broke Zarah completely. "I wish someone had saved me before it was too late." Zarah held the letter to her chest and cried. She cried for Amira, for Ayan, for herself, for all the girls who never got the chance to escape. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the stars, thinking. And by morning, she knew what she had to do. 10 years later, the quiet mansion was no longer silent. It echoed with laughter, footsteps, and the soft hum of life. Bright murals covered the walls, flowers, stars, and the faces of smiling girls. Zarah had turned the place into something new, a rescue home, a haven. She named it House of Amira. Girls from the streets came through the doors, frightened, quiet, carrying invisible wounds. Zarah welcomed each of them personally, calling them by name, giving them their own rooms, their own beds, their own hope. She taught them how to read, how to paint, how to speak without fear. She told them they mattered, that they weren't alone. Sometimes, at night, Zarah sat in the same library where she found the letter. She would read it again, just to remind herself why she started. Walter had passed away a few years earlier. His photo stood on the shelf beside Amira's. Zarah had forgiven him, not because he asked, but because she had chosen to move forward. And Ayan, he grew up to be a doctor. The same clinic Walter helped build now had his name on the door. Every week, he visited the house of Amira, bringing books and sweets, sitting with the girls and listening to their stories. Zarah never forgot where she came from, never forgot the cage, the pain, the mystery, but she turned it all into purpose, into light. And every girl who stepped into the house of Amira found what Amira had wished for in that letter, someone who saved them before it was too late. Thank you for watching. If you felt moved by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that matter. Stay tuned.